Here is Immortal Moments for explanation. Friends, like videos and subscribes to our channel. Tales of Herding Gods episode 99 explanation. So let's start our explanation. Qin Mu immediately sat up and looked out the window. Chancellor Shan's snores were deafening and he didn't wake up even when the chill wind blew into the room. Strange chanting came from outside, but the voice was not clear. Qin Mu couldn't tell whether it was light or heavy, slow or fast. Despite that, he immediately used Heavenly Devil creation technique to seal his souls and spirits before arousing his vital chi. Junior Protector sword which was hanging at the head of his bed came out of its sheath, and the silver sword light lit up the room. There was a white figure floating to and fro outside the window, and Junior Protector sword hummed and trembled. Sword lights shot out in a flash, and a few human heads outside the window fell to the ground. Harming people with shaman spells might sound bizarre, but those spells were nothing more than attacks targeted at the soul or the corporeal body. Even though Qin Mu wasn't too old, he knew the reason behind the bizarre occurrences. Spells that were targeted at the corporeal body required one to use secret techniques to enter the room and kill the person. Meanwhile, there were much more unimaginable methods that were targeted at the souls, for example, shaman poison. It could be used to poison the enemy's souls, and it was colorless, odorless, formless, and traceless, making it extremely hard for people to guard against it. Another example would be worshipping the soul using a straw doll. One would write the other person's date of birth and 8 characters of a horoscope on a doll and worship it for 10 days, worshipping away a soul or spirit each day. The 7 spirits would leave in 7 days and the 3 souls would come after. There was also victory-loathing technique, harming the soul to harm the body. By using needles or sharp blades to harm the soul, the shaman could make use of the connections between the soul and the corporeal body to harm the corporeal body by harming the soul. For example, by pricking the limbs of the soul, the enemy's corporeal body would also be pricked. If the heart of the brows was pricked, the mind would be messed up, and such. Being able to kill people by knowing their name was indeed slightly hard to imagine, but it shouldn't be much different from these two methods. Qin Mu sealing his souls and spirits while hanging Junior Protector sword at the head of his bed was to guard against these two methods. Suddenly, a weird laughter sounded, and Qin Mu looked over in a hurry. He saw numerous small humans climbing in through the window and jumping onto the ground. They wielded knives, axes, military forks, and rode small horses in a formation, looking like a huge army with several hundred men. This small human army swarmed forward and stood on Chancellor Shan's chest, yet Chancellor Shan didn't wake up, continuing to snore like thunder. The small human in the lead wielded a long spear and rode a steed on Chancellor Shan's nose. He pointed his spear at Qin Mu, who had already sat up, and his eyes were filled with the glow of excitement. With an incomprehensible shout, the other small humans went toward Qin Mu like a flood. The small humans were abnormally excited and kept shouting incomprehensibly as they waved their weapons with a fierce demeanor. Yet even though there were several hundred of them, Qin Mu felt that he could flatten all of them with 2 or 3 steps. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This was the reason why Butcher didn't dare to use his real name. Qin Mu pulled out his sword, but just as the sword lights were about to burst forth to sweep away all these small humans, he suddenly heard someone calling his name. This voice came in with the chill wind, and the words were dragged out, as if the person was quite far away. Qin Mu didn't say a word, but that voice was closing in on him rapidly. When other people called your name, even if you did not reply, there would be an uncontrollable reaction in your heart, and that voice had used this reaction to sense his location. So just as the sword lights in Qin Mu's hand were about to slaughter the small army, he suddenly felt a chill invading the heart of his brows. His hand up was about to pull out the sword and his soul froze in place. When his soul was frozen, his body did the same, and the sword lights naturally extinguished. The small humans danced around in joy and climbed onto his body, tunneling into him through his mouth, ears, and nose. The next moment, Qin Mu saw these small humans carrying him away in a sprint. What they were carrying wasn't his corporeal body. They had tunneled inside him to carry away his soul. These small humans had actually run into his body and tied up his soul tightly, then brought it out above their heads. Qin Mu didn't know what they were saying as they squealed to one another before running away with him. Qin Mu felt that he was unable to move while the sceneries in front of his eyes flickered before turning pitch black. All the lights in the surroundings vanished and only the darkness remained. He could see bubbles of light coming into existence under his body, and then noticed that he was lying on a sacrificial altar. The small humans had placed him down and were looking up at the sky. The one in the lead squeaked at the darkness and the sacrificial altar slowly rose up. Looking around, Qin Mu could see huge faces that were like the faces of puppets blocking his four sides. The faces of these wooden puppets were humongous and revealed an expression that was a smile yet not a smile, a cry yet not a cry. After that, the sacrificial altar trembled and rose up once again. A huge palm lifted it up along with the four wooden puppets, and Qin Mu immediately saw a blazing flame of light in the darkness. It was a huge eye which was much larger than the faces of the wooden puppets. Then, more and more huge eyes lighted up the darkness as they floated in the sky, looking extremely strange. Victory loathing spell? When Qin Mu saw this sight, his heart trembled slightly. Pan Gong So must have used victory loathing spell to make use of the small humans to invade him, trapping the souls and spirits that were sealed in his body on such a sacrificial altar. This method was very strange. When he heard the voice, it found its way over even if he didn't answer. That voice then transformed into a sacrificial altar in his body, and even though his souls and spirits had been sealed in his body, it wasn't enough. However, his souls and spirits should still be in his body, and as long as they were in his body, he had the chance to make a comeback. No matter what shaman spell you used, you will need to rely on your own magic power. In my body, your magic power will never surpass mine. You can forget about killing me. Qin Mu flipped his body up and shouted, "Sword, come!" Suddenly, a sword pellet came flying over through the darkness and floated in front of him. This sword pellet was the one Newt had given him when he had gone back to the village for New Year. Qin Mu had once used this sword pellet to guide out the remnant of the gods divine out of Imperial Preceptor's body, which resulted in the sword pellet being obliterated quite a bit and becoming smaller. Sword lights burst from the sword pellet and swept through the small humans in all directions, causing them to suffer a crushing defeat. The small humans had their chests and bellies split by Qin Mu, but they were not yet dead. Their broken limbs crawled here and there to reassemble themselves before continuing to attack Qin Mu. Meanwhile, the faces of the wooden puppets around the sacrificial altar revealed a strange smile as they raised their arms stiffly to smash towards him who was in the center of the sacrificial altar, causing sparks to fly in all directions. Qin Mu executed the sword pellet to contend against the strange wooden puppets and felt they possessed unusual strength. He was almost unable to withstand their blows. Some of the small humans were smashed by the wooden puppets and turned into a paper-like state, but in the next instant, they swelled back up as if they had been pumped with air and continued swinging their swords at Qin Mu. At this moment, the weird eyes in the darkness blazed furiously and beams of fire came shooting over in all directions. Qin Mu gritted his teeth to withstand the attacks, his soul on the verge of dispersing from all the attacks. The small humans, wooden puppets, and weird eyes seemed to be able to revive and come at him endlessly. There was no end to killing them, and they just kept attacking him, not knowing fatigue. Just as Qin Mu was about to fall into despair from exhaustion, he became furious. Is senior brother B.A. Shan still sleeping? At this moment, the crows of the roosters rang out in the air, and he could faintly hear the night watchman banging the gong to signal the fifth of the 5 night watch periods. Then, Qin Mu heard Chancellor B.A. Shan's yawn from seemingly far away. I waited the whole night, yet Pan Gong So never came to visit personally, truly disappointing. That brat is really careful and didn't cast any spells personally to kill junior brother Qin, but had another great shaman make his move. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Senior brother B.A. Shan knew I was trapped. A pity only a great shaman of 7 stars realm took the bait. Qin Mu heard Chancellor B.A. Shan pulling out his knife, and the tyrant knife was unsheathed. The golden knife adorned in white jade, with rays piercing into the night through the window. Man of 50 years yet nothing made, carrying knife in 8 wilderness all alone. Along with the song, a blinding light split apart the darkness and came down from the sky, slashing onto the sacrificial altar ruthlessly. The heaven and earth instantly rumbled before starting to crumble and disintegrate. This knife seemed to have split the world in 2 places that gradually opened up towards the left and right. These were Qin Mu's eyes, which were gradually opening, but what was strange was that he felt the eyelids of his eyes open towards the left and the right. This is the victory-loathing spell of Roland's Golden Palace, which I just undid for you. This kind of victory-loathing spell turns your eyeballs half upside down, so you are looking to your left and right. Chancellor Shan appeared to Qin Mu to be standing on the wall. Mobilize the muscles in your eyes and slowly adjust your eyeballs back to normal. Qin Mu followed his instructions. After some time, his eyeballs finally returned to normal and he immediately said, "Senior brother, I got trapped." Chancellor Shan nodded and pointed forward. "This is what trapped you." Qin Mu lowered his head and was slightly stunned. He saw that the sacrificial altar that had trapped him wasn't the real thing but a silver plate which had 4 wooden puppets that were the size of a palm around it. The small humans that had lifted him up were soybeans, and the horses under them were bean sprouts. Meanwhile, the eyes floating in the sky had been the eyes of huge spiders and not weird eyes that had been arranged in a line. Under the plate was a weasel. The spider and the weasel were both killed with a knife and died an unnatural death. I thought it would be Pan Gongso making a move and not some great shaman of 7 stars realm. Chancellor Shan shook his head. I reckon Pan Gongso didn't make a move but sent a great shaman of 7 stars realm instead because he was worried I would be by your side. He's really careful. Qin Mu looked out the window and saw that the heads he had severed using the sword lights were just straw men that were covered in white cloth. He asked, "Senior brother, what happened to the great shaman of 7 stars realm?" "He's dead," Chancellor Shan answered. "He cast his spell in his dream to harm you with victory-loathing technique and my knife broke his spell. My knife then entered his dream through his spell and cut him down in his sleep. In other words, he passed away very peacefully." Qin Mu was skeptical and asked, "Knife skills can be cultivated to such a level?" Chancellor Shan smiled. "Teacher Heaven Knife's knife skills can be called a legend. He can cut open the void, but I can't." When morning came, everyone in Imperial College was discussing how another envoy in barbarian Di Empire had died. It was said he died suddenly on the 5th of the 5 night watch periods with blood flowing out of all his orifices. He had died extremely miserably and even screamed 3 times before falling over. Qin Mu criticized in his heart, "Didn't senior brother Shan say he had passed away peacefully?" When afternoon came, a shaman came forth and bowed. "Prince invites cult master Qin to a banquet. Pan Gongso ordered a great shaman to cast a spell to take my life yesterday and then dares to invite me to a banquet today." Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Does he think as an equivalent sacred ground, Roland's Golden Palace can pressure heavenly devil cult? Or does he have other plans? Chancellor Shan walked over and asked, "Do you need me to follow you?" Qin Mu shook his head. "No need for that. If Pan Gongso dared to kill me in the open, he wouldn't have used shaman spells to kill me yesterday. I will meet him alone." Jade Fragrance Floor was the largest restaurant in the whole capital, using the layout of gardens. With a hall and a courtyard, there were rock gardens, flowing waters, fountains, and even beautiful women dancing and singing. Each courtyard was separated from the others and was very elegant and calm. The people coming here to eat and drink weren't here for the food but to have a place to chat. Before the disaster, the business here had been flourishing and even high officials and noble people had to book in advance. However, after the natural disaster broke out, the emperor had sent disaster relief personally and the high officials and noble people in the capital city also had to donate, so the business of Jade Fragrance Floor became slack. It was expected that after the effects of the natural disaster faded, the business of this restaurant would definitely flourish again. In green bamboo garden of Jade Fragrance Floor, Pan Gongso welcomed Qin Mu and said, "Cult Master Qin, my retainers have offended you and now that they are dead, let us bury the hatchet with their deaths. May Cult Master be magnanimous enough to forgive us." Qin Mu walked into green bamboo garden and looked around. "Prince is courteous." This courtyard was called Green Bamboo Garden and entering through a door with the shape of a full moon, there were thin bamboos as shade covering both sides of the path. He could hear the babbling of running water and after 2 turns, he saw clear water flowing down from a rock garden filled with oddly shaped rocks. Even though it was a small stream, it had the feeling of a waterfall crashing down onto the rocks at a great speed. This flowing water from the waterfall flowed into a jade vase held in the hand of a bodhisattva statue. That jade vase was tilted forward, letting the water flow out and land into the pond in the south after circulating one round in the vase. Qin Mu took a look and saw some sandy mounds in the southern pond. They were islands scattered about like stars in the sky, which was very interesting. Bodhisattva of Compassion of the South Sea was writing on the pond, and the words were vast and deep like the sea. The Bodhisattva was sculpted with the rock garden, and some small spells must have been used to let the water flow continuously. Even though the pond wasn't big, everything was done to the smallest detail. Looking at it up close, there was a feeling of standing in the sky above the South Sea and overlooking everything below. Cult Master Qin, please. Pan Gongso raised his hand and invited Qin Mu to walk through the corridor. They came to a private room beside the pond. Its windows were already open, so he could see the scenery of the garden by sitting near the window. There were two great shamans in yellow standing at the left and right side of the door without any expressions. Pan Gongso waved his hand and said, "Both of you can fall back, tell them to serve the dishes and wine." The two great shamans of Roland's Golden Palace walked out of the room, and after a moment, a waitress came to serve the dishes and wine. A few more maidens with alluring figures then came to the courtyard wearing outfits of different tribes. They played the blowing horn and yangqin while beating instruments like the damaru, giving off a different kind of flavor to the music. "It wasn't my idea to send someone to kill you yesterday night." Pan Gongso looked deeply into Qin Mu's eyes. "I don't need to borrow the hands of others to kill people. What happened yesterday was merely my retainer seeing you kill too many disciples of Roland's Golden Palace and becoming indignant, which was why he entered his dream to cast spells to harm you." Qin Mu couldn't help feeling astonished when he heard him bringing this up. He had originally expected Pan Gongso to avoid this topic, so he was surprised when the other decided to clear things up right after they were seated. "I see." Qin Mu smiled. "Luckily I'm fine and he's already dead. I believe that Little Prince has nothing to do with this matter." Pan Gongso shook his head. "You know nothing. I knew he was going to kill you, but I didn't stop him. Does Cult Master Qin want to know the reason why?" Qin Mu was slightly astonished and said modestly, "Little Prince is truly surprising, I'd like to hear the details." Pan Gongso poured wine for him and said, "The reason why I didn't stop him was because I knew you would definitely let Chancellor Shan stay in your room to guard against me casting spells in the night to kill you. He couldn't kill you, but he could delay you." Qin Mu raised his eyebrows and picked up his wine cup. The two of them toasted each other and drank the wine. Pan Gongso then continued, "You and I broke the wall at the same time and entered Six Directions realm. I didn't agree to your challenge at that time because I could see your battle power was indeed extraordinary, and I wasn't 100% confident that I could defeat you. However, everything has changed after this one day. 1 day's time, I just needed 1 day's time." He revealed a smile. The victory and defeat in a battle between experts can be decided with just 1 day's time. You had to meet the Crown Prince in the afternoon, so you had no time to strengthen your Six Directions realm, to discover the marvel of Six Directions realm. At night, you had to guard against the shaman spells from that retainer of mine and didn't have the time research Six Directions realm. On the other hand, I had a whole day's time to strengthen my Six Directions and raise my cultivation. Just 1 day's time is enough to turn your odds of victory to 0. Qin Mu was once again astonished and examined the other's face. He saw that it still had a soft and immature air to it, but his gaze was deep, having a kind of depth that a youth shouldn't have. He exclaimed in admiration, "The Little Prince of the Prairie is truly extraordinary, no wonder even Heaven Knife is afraid of you. You are only 14 years old now, right?" Pan Gongso poured wine for him once again and said, 13 years old. The people of the prairie brave the wind and sun, so our bodies are more rugged, making us look older. 13 years old is my age in this lifetime. If Cult Master is asking about the age of my soul, I'm already 11,000 years old." Qin Mu laughed loudly. "Little Prince is making me more and more astonished. I didn't expect you to say this out so easily." "I have no need to hide it from you," Pan Gongso said. "Cult Master Qin is also extremely admirable. You are the disciple of Heaven Knife, right?" To have this kind of cultivation at such a young age makes me exclaim endlessly in admiration. If it was on the day when we had broken into Six Directions realm, I would have only been 80% confident in defeating you in a match. Oh. Qin Mu smiled and didn't say a word as he fiddled around with his wine cup. Pan Gongso said firmly, counting this lifetime, I have already lived through 19 lifetimes. In my long life, I met countless heroes with none to compare with at that time and saw numerous lives and deaths, sorrows and happiness. Sometimes, I feel like I'm a reef standing upright in the passage of time while countless peerless talents flow by hurriedly like rushing waves, and even exceptional emperors of various eras are merely passing waves that I've paid no attention to. Even Heaven Knife, who had raised his knives at heaven, was merely a passing traveler hurrying by. I remember that in my 6th lifetime, I had felt that my path, skills, and divine arts were no longer able to go another step further, so I had entered the Central Plains to become a member of Tao Sect, to learn Pre-Celestial Supreme Mystery Technique and Tao Sword. At that time, Tao Master of Tao Sect held high expectation for me and allowed me to become Daozi. He even expected me to become Tao Master and lead Tao Sect. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched. This old monster had entered Tao Sect once and even became Daozi? Tao Sect's ultimate arts, Pre-Celestial Supreme Mystery Technique and 14 writings of Tao Sword were both learned by him. Tao Sword was very hard to comprehend. In that lifetime, I learned up to the 13th sword, but I could never comprehend the 14th sword from the beginning to the end. Pan Gongso sighed ruefully. Tao Sword was simply too difficult, so even if I had the power of Pre-Celestial Supreme Mystery Technique, it was too difficult to comprehend it completely. It required one to have a terrifying comprehension of algebra. Until I died of old age, I still didn't manage to learn the 14th sword. When I started my 7th lifetime, I entered Tao Sect again, but I still didn't manage to learn the 14th sword. I only succeeded in cultivating half of that sword move. When it came to the 8th lifetime, I entered Great Thunderclap Monastery. Qin Mu's heart trembled violently, and he looked into the other's eyes deeply. You felt that Tao Sword could no longer allow you to break through SP. You went to Great Thunderclap Monastery to learn Rulai's Mahayana Sutra. Wrong, Pan Gongso said solemnly. I went there to comprehend Buddhism. Great Thunderclap Monastery's Dharma has an extremely high comprehension on one's nature, and Rulai's Mahayana Sutra gathered Mahayana Buddhists that cultivated their nature, so I naturally had to learn it. I began from a small monk, reading through all the Buddhist scriptures of Great Thunderclap Monastery, comprehending all of them before learning Rulai's Mahayana Sutra. Qin Mu asked, the Rulai of that generation should have also held high expectations for you, right? He said my comprehension was the best in the world in that era and my attainments in Buddhism even surpassed his. I was said to have unhindered eloquence. I cultivated all 20 heavens of Rulai's Mahayana Sutra, but I still left Great Thunderclap Monastery in the end. The Buddhism of Great Thunderclap Monastery couldn't allow me to break through the final realm. In my next lifetime, I reincarnated into a woman and went to Passion Parting Palace. Another lifetime passed by, and I went to Little Jade capital. I stayed there for a few lifetimes, only then did I manage to learn all of the ultimate arts there. It's indeed the sacred ground that's above the 3 big sacred grounds. He sighed ruefully as he seemed to reminisce about the days in Little Jade capital. He paused for a moment. Then I went to Heavenly Saint Cult. The light in Qin Mu's eyes flickered, and he asked, Heavenly Saint Cult? You learned great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures? What did you comprehend? Pan Gongso revealed a smile and said, Great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures are very strong, but compared to Rulai's Mahayana Sutra and Tao Sword, they are slightly inferior. When I planned to leave, I heard about the unity technique of great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures which could only be passed down from cult master to cult master. I wanted to receive it very much, so I remained in Heavenly Saint Cult. It's a pity that the Heavenly Devil cult master of that generation was very strong and his disciple was very strong as well. This disciple was acclaimed as the saint that appears once every 500 years. I lost to him and missed the opportunity to become the cult master. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief, and Pan Gongso continued, That's why I betrayed Heavenly Devil cult and brought the experts of Tao Sect and gathered the righteous practitioners of the righteous path to attack Heavenly Saint cult, killing this saint that appears once every 500 years. The wine in Qin Mu's wine cup trembled and one drop landed on the table. That saint was indeed rare to find, and he fought down Master to death while managing to injure me severely after I had launched a sneak attack on him. However, he was still exhausted to death by us using countless practitioners of the righteous path. Pan Gongso said leisurely. Before he died, he passed on the position of the cult master and unity technique to Heavenly King Qing of that time. Even though I was severely injured, how could I let everything go to waste after thinking I could conquer Heavenly Saint cult with one more step? Therefore, I continued to lead everyone to attack, yet that cult master Qing imparted unity technique to the saints before leading the cult followers to fight to the death with me. I had no choice but to retreat back to the prairie with my injuries. He sighed ruefully. After that, I heard that cult master Qing died in Jade Ripple Pool. The saint has succeeded as the cult master and slaughtered so many practitioners of Tao sect and the righteous paths that they were left terrified. In the end, she exhausted her powers and died after passing down the position. How does Heavenly Saint cult refer to these three cult masters? Qin Mu said with an apathetic face, 3 kings. 3 kings? Pan Gongso thought about it, then praised, they are indeed worthy to be called 3 kings. Now you should know the relationship between me and Heavenly Saint cult, right? You should also know where my 80% confidence had come from, right? However, that was a day ago. Facing you now, I'm 100% confident in my victory. You don't even have a 10% chance of winning. Qin Mu rose and stretched his body. Let's go, I feel like killing people now. Pan Gongso rose and the two of them walked out side by side. Pan Gongso turned back to instruct the 2 great shamans, leave the dishes here, then warm them up, I'll be back soon. Qin Mu and Pan Gongso walked out side by side and left Jade Fragrance floor, walking out of the city while following the street. The capital city in the early spring was still pretty chilly, and even in the noon, the sun wasn't very high up. It was located in the southern part of the sky and wasn't dazzling in the least. The capital city was still pretty bustling in the spring, while people coming and going. Some young masters and young ladies of wealthy families would form companionship to walk around, and their clothes were mainly sable fur coats. Wearing these fluffy coats, it would serve as a contrast to make their fair skin stand out more. During this season, numerous wealthy families would already have boarded flying ships to head to the south to get through the winter, only coming back when spring was turning into summer. However, it was different this year. The natural disaster had caused the south to be as cold as the north and perhaps even colder, therefore most of the people still chose to remain in the north. After all, there were all kinds of natural and man-made disasters out there, so it would be better to stay safe in the capital city. Qin Mu and Pan Gongso walked very slowly as both of them were adjusting their state. Pan Gongso was no doubt a capable person that had reincarnated 19 lifetimes and lived 20 lifetimes. He soon adjusted his essence, chi, and spirit to their peak while Qin Mu was still slowly adjusting. Murderous intent started to pour out of Pan Gongso and was targeted at Qin Mu as he slowly quickened his footsteps. His murderous intent was directed at Qin Mu to make him react, having no choice but to change his walking posture so as to not reveal a mistake. In Imperial College, Qin Mu had aimed him in this way as well to force him to hobble as he walked, borrowing the bending of his body to not reveal any mistake in his action so that Qin Mu couldn't take advantage of him. Now, he was giving him a taste of his own medicine, using his peak performance and aura to pressure Qin Mu, forcing Qin Mu to follow his tempo, to change along with the change of his aura. As long as Qin Mu had no choice but to follow his tempo, he would be able to hold the right to be active, causing Qin Mu to fall into a passive state, becoming weary from dealing with him. To avoid revealing a mistake, Qin Mu would continuously change his trajectory and change his aura. The longer the road he took, the more changes there would be. In the end, the number of changes will surpass the horizons and knowledge of this youth, making him unable to change his trajectory anymore. When they reached the outskirts of the city, killing Qin Mu would just become a matter of 1 or 2 moves. Old fox. Qin Mu had a grave expression. This was a very terrifying existence. Pan Gongso was such a terrifying person. No matter if he was stronger than his opponent, he would immediately grab the upper hand if it was right in front of him, magnifying his superiority as much as he could. After 10,000 years of polishing, he was already rarely moved by external matters. Every word and every action moved according to the experience he had accumulated over the past 10,000 years, and his experience was like runes and reasons, deeply imprinted in his moves and actions. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and Blind had both said before, to apply knowledge and action as one. Old Ma had also said to abide by the rules. With the accumulation of 10,000 years, Pan Gongso had managed to achieve this step. As for applying knowledge and action as one, Qin Mu had his own understanding. Not taking action according to your knowledge, that's insincerity. Not succeeding after taking action, that's incapability. Taking action because of knowledge, that's the heart of utter sincerity. Succeeding in your action, that's carrying out to the end. At this point, it would already be difficult for one to be influenced by other people and incidents. And the prerequisite of applying knowledge and action as one was pursuing knowledge to the end. To study the underlying principle of a matter and turn it into one's own knowledge. For example, cooking. To perfect the craft of cooking so there's nothing to be picky in regards to the color, fragrance, and taste. For example, construction. To construct buildings and pavilions to be sturdy, beautiful, and useful, being able to look magnificent and not crumble under storms or earthquakes. For example, shipbuilding. To fully understand the principle of building a ship, using sturdy materials and not sinking when facing wind and waves. This was pursuing knowledge to the end. To study one thing or one matter to its extreme, understanding all the principles behind it. When one managed to pursue knowledge to the end, could one apply knowledge and action as one. Pan Gongso was such a person. Reincarnating over and over again, he had studying all kinds of techniques to their extremes, and all the knowledge he had learned had become his foundation, becoming a part of his words and actions. Every action and word from him held deep significance, and even from the start where Qin Mu had met him, Qin Mu was already brought into his tempo. From Qin Mu's provocation outside Hall of Six Directions and all the way to chatting with Pan Gongso in Jade Fragrance Floor was all a web weaved by him. A huge web that was methodically weaved to trap Qin Mu within. Now, as they walked out of the city, it was this spider pulling back its web while spitting silk on Qin Mu's body, coiling around Qin Mu and binding him. This made the space which Qin Mu could move around in becoming smaller and smaller. When they were out of the city, it would be the time for the huge spider to spit its venom to poison its prey. Qin Mu had never seen such a terrifying opponent before. No matter if it was Daozi or Fozi, or even those great experts of celestial being realm and life and death realm that had chased after his life, they were all much inferior compared to Pan Gongso. Now, Qin Mu was already forced to hobble as he walked, leaning unsteadily from side to side. Meanwhile, Pan Gongso was walking more and more steadily. He was forcing Qin Mu to show all his changes so as to not show his mistake. When Qin Mu exhausted all his changes, it would be the death of Qin Mu. To be able to clash with such a terrifying existence is a huge opportunity. Qin Mu's footsteps suddenly stopped, and in that instant where he had stopped, hundreds of mistakes appeared on his body. It could be said that there were mistakes all over his body. Pan Gongso was slightly stunned and also stopped in his footsteps. In this instant, he had the urge to make a move. With mistakes all over Qin Mu's body, these were all fatal mistakes that could take Qin Mu's life with one strike in Pan Gongso's eyes. However, he hesitated for an instant. Qin Mu was the Heavenly Devil Cult Master, and Heavenly Devil Cult Master has an extremely huge power, the #1 sect in the secular world. If he was to kill Qin Mu here, it was difficult for him to escape the revenge of Heavenly Devil Cult. In this instant where he hesitated, all of the mistakes on Qin Mu's body vanished and his aura suddenly burst forth, releasing his murderous intent, which overwhelmed Pan Gongso as he raised his leg to walk forward. Pan Gongso's expression sank and had no choice to catch up with him, sinking into a passive state. Qin Mu made use of his hesitation to free himself from the disadvantageous situation. This was indeed out of his expectation. Even though it was evident that this youth's experience was inferior to him, he had a kind of acute spirit that was long obliterated in him. After reincarnating so many times, that acute determination to improve in his first lifetime had slowly been obliterated under the endless passage of time through lifetime after lifetime. Now, he had once again seen this kind of essence, qi, and spirit from Qin Mu. Now, it was his turn to be suppressed by Qin Mu and forced to walk forward in accordance to Qin Mu's tempo. The body techniques and auras of these two people changed continuously, and each change was very fine. However, as they walked more and more, the swaying of Pan Gongso's body became wider and wider, making him look like a drunk man that was leaning from side to side, catching the attention of many people. The situation now seemed like Qin Mu was using an invisible rope to lead a 13 to 14 years old drunk child to walk on the street. The battle of experts was just like this. Especially when the difference between the both of them was not huge, any carelessness would result in a reversal of situation. Qin Mu made use of his mental state in not daring to make a move on him in the city to reverse the situation. Even though the two people had yet to exchange blows, they have already started to clash using their wisdom. Even if the situation was reversed, Qin Mu still didn't let his guard down. It was as Pan Gongso had said, Qin Mu had no time to strengthen his Six Directions realm. Even though he had entered Six Directions realm at the same time as Pan Gongso was different from him. Pan Gongso had the experience of 20 lifetimes and had broken through Six Directions realm 20 times. In just a day, Pan Gongso had enough time to strengthen this realm and mobilize the power that could be mobilized in this realm. On the other hand, Qin Mu had to spend time to familiarize and figure his way around in order to control the power in this realm. The most crucial point was that he had no time now to cultivate his Six Direction realm. He already had the circulation diagram of Six Direction realm and Seven Stars realm. One of obtained from the first hall in Imperial College, while the circulation diagram of Seven Stars realm was inscribed on a stone tablet in Roland's Golden Palace. However, for him to comprehend Unity Technique, he needed to fuse Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique and Great Educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures, and it was impossible for Pan Gongso to give him time to fuse his techniques. Qin Mu's mind delved into his Six Directions divine treasure, and in this divine treasure, he saw his spirit embryo. He then saw the 5-element stars and shrine in the sky, sensing his 5-element star sovereigns. From this angle of the spirit embryo, he could see the 4 sides of heaven and earth. It was evident after entering Six Directions realm, it was required for him to combine these 3 great divine treasures as one. His technique had to pass through all 3 great divine treasures to form one whole body. In his Six Directions divine treasure, there were 4 sides of heaven and earth, strengthening his magic power to be able to execute divine arts. This was a qualitative leap, but since he didn't have the circulation diagram of Six Directions realm for Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique, it would be his greatest shortcoming. Finally, the two of them walked out of the capital city and came to the outskirts of the city. The extent of Pan Gongso's movement as he was walking became more and more exaggerated as he staggered along. However, the changes in his body motions and techniques were still endless as he maintained a perfect state that didn't have any mistake. Qin Mu couldn't help admiring him. As they walked from the center of the city to the outskirts of the city, just the body techniques alone had gone through dozens of changes from Pan Gongso. Each and every kind of body technique was extremely intricate and cultivated to their extremes. He moved forward using the form of a dragon and really looked like a true dragon moving on the land. When he moved like a tiger, he gave off a feeling like he was a fierce tiger. When he executed the body technique of a phoenix, he was flying low like a phoenix. When he executed the body technique of a swimming fish, he was like a fish swimming against the current. It was hard to imagine how a person could cultivate so many body techniques to the extreme. 2 of them moved further and further, and their murderous intents grew thicker and thicker. From Qin Mu's Dao Tai sack, a sword pellet flew out along with Junior Protector Sword, hanging on his waist. Meanwhile, the 2 pig-slaughtering knives on Qin Mu's back dropped off, and the 2 knives stabbed into the ground one after another, showing only the knives' handles. The 2 knives were over 30 yards apart. His bamboo cane stabbed onto the ground while his iron hammer landed on the ground. From his sleeves, his brush, ink, papers, and inkstone also slid out and got thrown onto the ground as he was walking. As he was walking, his body trembled and heavy chunks of iron fell off from the front and the back of his chest. The iron boots on his feet suddenly exploded, and the iron weight strapped on his legs also fell off. His body became light and his bones crackled and rattled. his aura had actually once again risen like the tide. Pan Gong So still continued moving along with his tempo. Qin Mu raising his aura had brought him an even larger pressure, but he was still able to endure and didn't reveal any slight mistake. The grasses on the grassland far away had already grown out, and there were numerous couples stepping on the greenery as they formed companionships to go on a spring outing. Some children were flying kites and running happily on the grassland. Some young men were showing off their body techniques as they rose into the sky with a few steps, stepping on the kites in the air, arousing the girls below to exclaim in admiration. The exclaims of admiration gradually lessened as the people started to look at the two strange youths, which were Qin Mu and Pan Gong So. The flock of birds in the forest flapped upwards and moved far away to avoid them. The murderous intent from these two youths had astonished them. As Qin Mu and Pan Gong So walked to the side of Mud River, and suddenly there were countless of huge fishes jumping out of the water, flopping on the surface of the river to escape towards the heart of the river, making the river extraordinarily bustling. The instant these fishes and birds jumped and flew up, the child suddenly closed his eyes and opened his mouth wide to bawl loudly. Amidst the cries, Qin Mu and Pan Gong So, who were beside the river, unleashed their moves at practically the same time. All kinds of runes from Buddhist scriptures appeared around Qin Mu's body and revolved like a huge bell covering him. The five heavens from Rulai's Mahayana Sutra took shape as Buddha's voice surrounded him. At the same time, he activated 9 dragon monarch technique, and the dragon chi came swarming from the 9 huge dragon veins surrounding the capital city, raising his aura once again. 9 dragon monarch technique was the supreme art of the imperial family and had been taught to him by Emperor Yangfeng personally. Under Qin Mu's execution, the dragon chi pouring out from the 9 dragon veins materialized and even entered the river water, causing dragons to fly out of the river while surging towards Qin Mu. He took the first strike. At this point, no matter if Pan Gong So revealed any mistake or not, he would be crushed by Qin Mu's abnormally dense vital chi that could suppress all kinds of intricate moves. Pan Gong So would be overwhelmed by an incomparable strength. The best method to deal with Pan Gong So was to use magic power to overwhelm him and not compete with him in moves. Boom! The river water exploded and flooded into the sky, transforming into the form of a huge Buddha that was over 30 yards tall, which and stood like a water mountain on the river. Water dragons coiled around this huge Buddha, and its 5 fingers were like 5 mountains rushing down at Pan Gong So. The 9 dragons let out angry roars as 9 dragons monarch technique fused with Tempest of the 9 dragons from Thunderclap 8 strikes. This strike showed the vastness of Buddhism's divine arts and the invincibility of the imperial family. The 9 dragons pounced on their target. Bang, bang, bang. The speed of the stream surpassed the speed of sound, and they exploded with thunderous bangs, facing nothing they couldn't destroy. What's divine art? This is divine art. Qin Mu's strongest point was his magic power, which surpassed that of his peers by several times. Even the old monsters like Village Chief were much inferior to him on the same realm. This kind of magic power was something Pan Gong So had no hope of matching. That's why Qin Mu wanted to use his absolute strength to overwhelm Pan Gong So, turning all of his 11,000 years of cultivation useless. At the instant Qin Mu's attack was about to burst forth, Pan Gong So's counter also arrived. What he used was a sword pellet that was the size of a thumb, and resplendent sword lights burst forth from within it. The second writing from the 14 writings of Tao sword, binding of 5 chi and 3 eons, rising on the spot, cloud chariots crossing. He used the ultimate art of Tao sect straight away, using the purest pre-celestial supreme mystery technique to execute the second sword of Tao sword. The sword lights contained wood, fire, earth, gold, and water, which are the 5 chi, heaven eon, earth eon, water eon, as well as the 3 eon. Heaven eon was akin to the sun and called supreme yang, water eon was akin to the moon, which was called supreme yin, while earth eon was the neutralization. Once he executed this sword skill, the sword lights constructed the ideal world of Tao sect, one with a sword sun, sword moon, sword earth, and the invigoration of the 5 chi. The sword skills of Tao sect required extremely high attainments in algebra and used it as their foundation. They believed that all the great Tao in the heaven and earth could be answered using algebra. This was their path of 1 produces 2, 2 produce 3, and 3 produce all things. In their eyes, numerals construct everything in the world. Even if it were life forms or something else, it was all the same. Everything was ultimately just wonderful numerals. This was why Tao sect had created a circular Wuji diagram, the Taiji diagram that separates yin and yang, and also the 4 symbols diagram, 8 trigrams, 64 hexagrams, to calculate the great Tao and all things of the heaven and earth. And when these became sword skills, they would form pictures and be in operation continuously, evolving all living things in the world and achieving magnificent power. Tao sect's 14 writings of Tao sword contained an ideal world in each writing. They were beautiful pictures developed from algebra, interpreting the marvel of heaven and earth. This was the biggest difference between Tao sect and Buddhism. Tao sect was the school of maths and Buddhism was the school of mind. The disciples of Tao sect often joked about it among themselves. Your math isn't good? What are you cultivating for then? It's better to go home earlier to carry your baby. The divine arts of the two people collided. One was a sword skill divine art while the other was a corporeal body divine art and a spell divine art. When they collided, it was a terrifying sight. The surface of the river trembled, and water floated up into the sky. More than that, the ground trembled as well, resulting in a minor shake. The impact of the aftermath caused fine jets of water to pierce through the willows beside the river, while the sword chi stabbed into the rocks, creating numerous holes in the reefs by the shore. The world-shaking strike from Qin Mu rushed into the ideal world of Tao sect formed by Pan Gong Tso's sword lights, and the overwhelming power got broken down by the mathematics contained in the sword lights. In Pan Gong Tso's sword skill, something as boring as algebra could be enchanting and resplendent. Among the enchanting sword lights, the 9 water dragons and water Buddha rapidly crumbled, unable to withstand a single blow from the second move of Tao's sword. Countless sword lights flew and struck the Buddha rays which had transformed into a huge bell around Qin Mu. Ripples appeared on the surface of the bell, and in the next instant, the huge bell was destroyed. Qin Mu had no change in expression as his sword pellet landed into his hand. In an instant, the sword lights from inside the pellet burst forth. Qin Mu didn't use sword treading mountains and rivers, but went straight to the second move of sword picture. Whoosh! One side of Mud River turned scarlet, and blood-red sword lights poured forward like a huge sea. Among them, there seemed to be an emperor god rising up, pointing his sword at his enemies while looking disdainfully at everything out of the corner of his eye. Sword of founding emperor, sea of blood. Tao's sword and sword picture collided, and Pan Gong Tso gave a grunt. The 5 chi and 3 eons were instantly destroyed as matchless sword lights came bombarding his face with exceptional killing intent. His body rose into the sky and soared like a brave dragon, executing marvelous body technique. It changed continuously like swimming fish, flying sparrows, and 9 phoenixes, but he still couldn't avoid all of the sword lights. Kai, Kai, Kai! Crimson lights emanated from his body as he leaped around, landing on the surface of the river and exploding the water in all directions. Whoosh! Qin Mu leaped up, and the sword lights in his hand vanished. The sword pellet transformed into a huge knife and sliced apart the river surface. Pan Gong Tso swung his sword pellet to receive this blow only to hear a series of bangs. He tumbled 6 to 7 times on the river surface like a skipping stone that a child had thrown before stopping his momentum. On the other side, Qin Mu sprinted over while stepping on the river surface, and every time his feet landed on the river's surface, there was a huge explosion, splattering water in all directions. Before Pan Gong Tso could even land on his feet, Qin Mu had already sprinted several hundred yards forward. The huge knife suddenly pulled back and covered his fist like flowing water. Qin Mu gave a punch. Boom! The river surface trembled as water dragons glowing with a green light roared in anger and drowned out Pan Gong Tso, who was dozens of yards away. The river surface became incomparably bustling in a split second. 45 dragons flew out from the punch and merged with the river water as they rushed towards Pan Gong Tso, resulting in endless loud bangs. Qin Mu leaped into the sky while stretching his 10 fingers out. With his palms facing the sky, he pulled downwards and bolts of lightning lighted up the river surface. Those bolts of lightning gathered together as they struck in the center of the 45 dragons. As Qin Mu was coming down, the sword pellet in his hand changed into countless sword lights, sword-treading mountains and rivers. The sword lights transformed into vast mountains and rivers that descended from the sky. They crashed into the water, breaking the surface and splitting the river in a radius of 12 yards. The water that had risen was then separated into droplets that formed mountains in the river. Underneath, blood sprayed out as a figure escaped toward the bottom of the river. Qin Mu raised his hand, and his junior protector sword that was on his waist flew out with a hum. His index finger revolved, and junior protector sword spun frantically. Sword chi surrounded it as it used drill sword form, breaking apart the water to shoot straight to the bottom of the river, chasing the trail of blood. Qin Mu's shirt fluttered as he gently floated down from the sky and stepped on the river's surface, which was billowing with waves. The sound of waves crashing against themselves came from behind him, and it was something from when he was sprinting over. The waves were raised into midair and only landed down now, flying up and dispersing like fine jade. On the river's surface, Qin Mu changed his footsteps, and the river's surface around his feet instantly changed. The water whirled around him as if there were transparent flood dragons surrounding him, forming a huge circle. Shoo! Junior protector sword flew out from the river surface, continuing to spin the air. However, it was gradually slowing down. When it came in front of Qin Mu, it had already stopped spinning. The sword sheath on Qin Mu's waist flew out, transforming into a fish dragon, and swallowed the sword with its huge mouth before returning to his waist as a sword sheath. Qin Mu's expression remained calm as usual while he stood quietly. The sword pellet flew out from his hand and hovered in front of him, looking like a slightly larger water droplet. In his surroundings, streams of water were slowly rising into the sky as though the rain was falling in the other direction. The river water that rose into the sky turned into water vapor, forming clouds that covered a radius of dozens of yards. Flashes of lightning and rumbles of thunder came from the clouds. As the lightning flashed from time to time, scales and claws could be faintly seen. Pan Gong So, you have disappointed me. Qin Mu's calm voice traveled over the river's surface as he spoke indifferently. Does the cultivation of your 19 lifetimes only amount to this? Why don't you dare to come out? I'm waiting to kill you so I can go back to continue my meal. After all, the dishes are going to turn cold soon. There was no movement on the river's surface. Qin Mu frowned and turned around to walk back to the shore. As he walked back through the same route he had taken earlier, astonished faces were all around him as the people turned their heads to look at him. Tourists followed him with their gazes as he walked away. Qin Mu ignored them and picked up the brush, ink, papers, and inkstone he had thrown out before noticing the iron hammer. He stretched his hand to grab the handle of the hammer and suddenly raised it to give a powerful slam on the ground. With a loud boom, the air in front of him was compressed to become a wall which soon crumbled to pieces. With this smash on the ground, the earth sunk and split open. Tremors came from underground as a figure moved away rapidly. Qin Mu leaped forward as if he was flying and came to the bamboo cane at the next instant. With a smack of his palm, the bamboo cane shot down into the ground and blood spurted out from the small hole it had made. Qin Mu leaped a few more times and came to the front of the two pig slaughtering knives. With his head below and legs above, his hands grabbed onto the handles of the knives. As he spun with them, countless knife lights sliced into the earth. His body moved forward, and he spun while the knife lights continued slashing into the earth like rain and waterfall. Suddenly, Qin Mu opened up his legs and slammed the ground with the backs of his knives. He flipped in the air before landing steadily on his feet. Sheathing his knives behind him, he turned around and walked into the capital city. Soon after that, he came to Jade Fragrance floor and walked into Green Bamboo Garden, coming to the private room after taking 2 turns around the statue of Bodhisattva of Compassion. The 2 great shamans were still in the private room and revealed astonishment when they saw him. Are the dishes still warm? Qin Mu asked. One of the great shamans looked at him in a daze while the other nodded immediately. What about the wine? The wine has turned slightly cold. Qin Mu waved his hand and said, Go warm it up and serve it to me. You, stay behind to pour it for me. This video is end here. Like the video and subscribe to my channel.